All right, ladies and gentlemen, we now have another very special guest who's joining us, and he'll help us decode from an industry point of view. Kumar Abhishek, he's the founder and the partner of ToneTag, is now joining us. Kumar, the Finance Ministry has issued a clarification that MDR won't be brought in, but then why are these amendments being moved now? What is the government's intent? What is the government's thinking behind, this bill? Because it will have enabling provisions.
Look, I think what we need to realize is that India has built one of the world's best payment rails, right? And today it is at a scale which is unmatched on this planet, right? And to sustain this growth and also to ensure that especially the security and fraud layers, continuous innovation could happen there. And most of these costs, right, could be structured in a way that it is sustainable. And we continue to be one of the world's best rails, right? There has to be some way to ensure revenues come through, right? Also, I think there are a lot of comments on a macro level that, hey, there is going to be a substantial cost and this is going to change merchant behavior, or merchant is going to pass on this additional cost to consumers. But that's macro. On reality, you will see that a lot of this is going to actually benefit both customers and merchants. So that most likely this is going to get applied to large merchants, right? Now today, most of the large merchants are already paying roughly 1% plus on accepting card transactions. Now they don't know when a customer walks in whether he's going to pay in UPI or card. The cost of the goods remains same, whatever is the payment method, right? And today, say for processing 2,000 rupees.
Right, Abhishek, when large merchants, when this is going to go to large merchants, that could very well be passed on to consumers as well. And, one can't really say for sure whether that's not going to go to smaller merchants, which are really the backbone of the UPI ecosystem. But let me also ask you about, comparisons that have been drawn with Brazil's PIX and, of course, China, which has also built a commercially sustainable digital payments ecosystem. But then these countries have 90% penetration of UPI. However, is it right to sort of compare these countries and what they're doing with their own digital payments ecosystem with India? Because, they do have differences in per capita incomes versus India.
So definitely we can't compare both of these tech stacks, and also the country in general, right? Because of GDP is one factor. But in general, if you see the way our tech stacks have been built, right, and the volume and the masses to which it has reached now, right, these are completely uncomparable stacks, A. B is that, look, we are really looking at a cost wherein, say, 2,000 rupees, where large merchants are already paying a percent plus, which is like almost 20 rupees to process that, right? Today, if MDR comes through UPI, you are going to pay just 4 rupees, right? And most likely this cost is not going to pass on to consumers. And if you are thinking about, hey, this will go to small merchants, even there, if you just look at last year GST cut, right? 90% plus consumer goods saw a GST cut from 12% to 5%. That's like almost 7% reduction, right? And here we are just talking about 20 basis point, which is like 20 or maybe 30 basis point, right? Which is like so negligible that currently the ecosystem players don't see that is going to have a real impact either on merchants or consumers.
Right. We have time for one more question, Abhishek, and this is essentially about the kind of policy intervention that the government could possibly look at, that NPCI or RBI could look at, without, of course, passing on the burden to consumers, and making sure that the trajectory of UPI that we've seen in the past, that only continues to go on. But of course, a delicate balance needs to be struck, and UPI is made commercial. What are some of your thoughts on this?
Is that I think we must create some way to take the cost burden. So charging large merchants, I think, is in the right direction. B, that UPI needs, or infrastructure like these needs to be made more accessible, right? So India has huge.
But what are you proposing, Abhishek?
Sorry, can you hear me now? So So in the country, we
Yes,
still
what are you
have
proposing?
400 million plus customers who are not using UPI. And if we make UPI more accessible, for example, people using their voice to access UPI, right, in a language which they understand, then I think we make this tech stack or this payment rail more accessible to the consumers, right? And I think that could be another great intervention which NPCI and RBI could look into.
All right, Abhishek, thank you very much. And those are some of the suggestions that we do hope that the government will possibly be looking at. But of course, important to see that this clarification has once again been reiterated by the Ministry of Finance. Thank you very much for joining us here on Startup Central. Ladies and gentlemen, time for us to step into a very short commercial break. But after the break, we have an exclusive conversation with Freshworks CEO and President lined up for you. Don't go anywhere and keep watching Startup Central.